Hi, everyone. I'm really excited today to introduce you to presenter Amber Wentworth. Hi, Amber. Thanks for coming and chatting with me today.
Hi, Tracy. Thanks so much for having me.
So you're welcome, but everyone's going to notice straight away that gorgeous accent. So do you want to start by sharing a little bit about who you are, where you're from?
Sure, sure. I'm from Texas, and I'm like a fifth generation Texan. So yeah, you can say I'm very proud of that fact. I live with my husband. We started together when I was 15. So you could say he was my high school sweetheart. And obviously, we've been married for almost 34 years. We have two kids, almost a 27 and 28-year-old. Well, actually, my daughter just turned 28. And I have a 1-year-old granddaughter. And my daughter, granddaughter, and son in law live next door. So it's like super
Oh,
exciting. Yeah. And I spend my days basically promoting the low carb way of living because it has made such a dramatic difference in my life that I feel, very passionate about, letting other people know that if what they're doing isn't working, then, maybe there's something else. So I spend a lot of time. I'm also a carnivore coach certified by meatrx.com, Sean Baker. And I'm an interviewer for MeatRx too for success stories of those who have had great success doing keto low carb kind of thing. So I get to interview people and hear their successes a lot, and it's so exciting. I love it. So yeah, I do a lot of that.
wow, that's awesome. So I remember probably 18 months ago, I came across Sean Baker, and yes, he was promoting the carnivore lifestyle. And I remember my first reaction was, oh, no, that is ridiculous. How can we, not eat vegetables? That just doesn't, and that was my instant reaction. And I think it probably is for a lot of people when they don't, maybe when they first come across a carnivore way. Was that the same for you, or how did this sort of evolve for you from low carb to more carnivore?
Yeah, it's been a transition for me all along. I started out basically low carb, and it just made such a difference for me as far as being hungry and craving that it made it really easy to start cutting out things more and more. And so it was just like this natural progression. And next thing you know, I'm full blown keto. And at that time, I was doing these elaborate recipes, trying to recreate what I used to eat. I think we all do that. But
Yes,
I
me
kind of
too.
phased that out. Yeah, right. And there's so many good recipes. But I kind of started phasing that out because I stopped really caring about food. So I became even more strict, not because I had to necessarily, not because I forced myself to do it. It was a natural progression. And then by
Mm.
the time I was at the end point, right before I transitioned to carnivore, I was pretty darn strict, and I was only eating once a day, what's called OMAD, 1 meal a day, because I
Mhm.
wasn't hungry, not because I was starving myself, not because I was forcing myself to go by a clock. Oh, you can't eat till this time. I wasn't hungry. I didn't crave. I didn't, need those constant meals. So I was only eating once a day anyway. So it wasn't that big of a deal. I was eating a lot of vegetables. I really wasn't eating fruit at that point. I had phased out all fruit. And but I did eat a lot of broccoli, especially sometimes Brussels sprouts, those kind of things. I've always been a big veggie eater, and I have a friend who was carnivore, and by this point, I didn't really find that so bizarre. I just didn't know necessarily it was for me because I loved vegetables. Even since I was a little bitty kid, I loved vegetables. I was a weirdo. I at 3 years old, I was eating a can of spinach for breakfast. Who does that? But I did. But
Yeah.
so I really, really, really love vegetables. So I wasn't really sure how well I was going to do cutting them out. And but I wanted to be able to talk about the full spectrum of low carb from, the very basic low carb all the way up to carnivore, the two extremes. And I felt like in order to be able to speak about that, I needed to experience it. So I was like, what the heck? I'll just give it a go for 30 days because they were doing that, 30-day try it kind of thing. So I thought, what the heck? And my friend was bugging me, and I was like, okay. And I had a few issues. I had my rosacea was still kind of there, not horrible. Keto had cleared a lot of it up, but it was still there. And I was still on one blood pressure medication. So I was like, what the heck, let's give this a go.
Mm.
And within the first week, I felt so darn good that I didn't really care about the vegetables, honestly. It wasn't difficult for me. I don't, probably because I had already phased so much stuff out by that point, it was no big deal for me. So, it's just been this real gradual progression and
Mm.
nothing forced, nothing that I had to do. It just
Mm.
naturally happened for me. And that is the beauty of it, is that,
Mm.
I didn't have to suffer. I didn't have to be miserable. I didn't have to go through these weird things, of cravings and all, because I had already dealt with that gradually as I went along. So it
Yeah,
was it, it
yeah.
was not hard for me. It really wasn't.
So not to go too much down this track, because I know, your summer presentation is all about how, this way of eating has changed your life completely and changed your relationship with food. But just a little bit, because you said in that, when you were just speaking, that you didn't care about food anymore. So how different is that to what it used to be like for you? Because I know you're obviously a lot bigger than before. You've had, so many years of dieting, trying everything without getting anywhere. But, that relationship with food, has it changed a huge amount for
Dramatically, yes, yes.
you?
Before I would wake up in the morning thinking of food. Can't wait to get out of bed to have my breakfast, my cereal or my oatmeal with my banana and my orange juice and that whole thing, and my 45 calorie whole wheat bread that I made a little cinnamon toast with, but I used Splenda. Little did I know at the time. But anyway, so I had my breakfast, and as soon as I finished my breakfast, I was already ready for lunch, getting excited. Oh, I get to eat at lunch. And this is even when I was trying to cut back and on a, typical low fat, low calorie diet kind of thing. I was always thinking of food. And of course, when you're on a diet, because those are diets, you want food. You just want it so bad because you kind of are telling yourself you can't have it. So you want it all the more. Plus, you have that whole craving and hunger because of the sugar and the carbs. And so I would just obsess over food horribly.
Mm.
And I desserts. I mean, gosh, I could live off desserts. And, not being able to have that on a diet was just horrifying to me because it was like I lived for desserts, especially
Mm.
chocolate. So there
Mm.
was this major, major food addiction.
Mm.
And I lived that way God, for most of my life,
Mm.
and I didn't really understand it as an addiction. And
Mm.
so I struggled with that. And diets were so difficult. They were so difficult because I was so hungry and I was so craving everything and I felt deprived and I was angry. So I had this all going on. But when I went low carb, and this is no joke, I'm not exaggerating this. You can even ask my husband because he was like, whoa, this is really different because I wasn't angry and I wasn't hangry and, just miserable. It felt like this burden was lifted from me.
Mm.
Like I was able to give up those things and it wasn't painful. Where
Mm.
before it was so, so painful to give up the things that I loved. And as I watched my friends continue to indulge in those things, it would just make me want to cry. And I did many times. But now I don't care. Eat that bread up in my face, eat that dessert. I don't care. It doesn't bother me because I don't crave that. I'm not saying I wouldn't enjoy it if I had it or anything like that, but I don't feel this obsession with it that I have to have it, that my life is not complete without it. That's a
Mm.
huge thing for me. Of
Yeah.
that, I derived a lot of pleasure from that. That was my pleasure. I'll be honest with you, food was my pleasure.
Yeah.
And now food is not my entertainment. Food is not my pleasure. Not that I don't enjoy my food, it's not that. But it's no longer the center of my life. Where before honestly, food was the center of my life. So that's a really
Mm,
huge thing. And I don't think people understand that.
mm,
They think that this is just any other diet. And it can be if you don't allow yourself enough time to adjust and have that wonderful feeling of the lack of hunger and lack of cravings. You got to give it a little bit of time. For me, it was pretty quick. I don't know why I was that lucky. I know some people, it takes a little bit longer to adjust, but for me, it was so instant that it rocked my world. It literally did. And that's why I am such a huge proponent of this,
mm,
because if people just give it a chance, it really does wonders.
fantastic. Well, the food addiction side of things is so fascinating, because there's so many people that don't believe that you can be addicted to food. Yet, if I think anyone that actually works with people in this area will just say it is, it is real. And one of the things we often do, when we do have a food addiction, and then we go on a diet, because we're always trying to do the best we can. I mean, there is no judgment around this. We are just doing what we think, is the right thing with what we know in terms of health. But one of the things I used to do is have all these rules. So yes, I was like you. I would think about food all the time. Then I'd go on a diet and I think, okay, so I'm going to have a rule now where all I'm going to have is dessert, one night a week, or I just make up all these rules, which are all made up. But in the end,
Yeah.
it just kept me locked in that, and all I could do was think about it. And then when you understand the physiology of how we're made and why dieting and eating the current recommended diet, which is low fat, very high in carbs, doesn't include a lot of meat, or very low in protein, of course we're going to be always hungry, because it just throws our hormones out of whack. We're not getting the nutrients we need. We're just not getting what our body needs to be happy. So it's always going to be sending out these signals. So it's really, really hard if we don't address that, both
Absolutely.
sides. Yeah, yeah. So one of the things people say about the carnivore, lifestyle is, what about fiber, and what about nutrients? What about the nutrients that we think we can get from vegetables? What's your view on that as a carnivore coach?
Oh, well, I love this question. Well, let me just tell you something. I struggled with stomach issues like constipation, gas, bloating, pain so bad that sometimes I'd fall to my knees of pain. And
Mm,
I've had this since I was a little kid when I would eat all those vegetables, right? Well, when I went keto, it improved a lot. So I thought, oh, that must be what good digestion is like. Okay, let me just tell you, the first 3 days of having zero fiber, I was like, what is this? I had no bloaty feeling. I had zero gas. Trust me on this. One of the big things carnivores always say is, we don't have gas. I didn't have any issues going to the bathroom or anything. And I was like, what is this thing? This is awesome. And it's only gotten better and better. So for me, now I have absolutely no desire to ever eat a vegetable again, because now I understand what they did to me. Now, I'm not demonizing vegetables by any means, and some people do fine with them. They hurt me. And there's a lot of other things in plants that do affect a lot of people. And
mm,
they just don't know it. And we've always been told, oh, you have to have plants, have to have plants. It's so important. Eat your veggies, eat your fruit. Well, let me just tell you, I'm about as healthy as I've ever been, and I don't eat any veggies, and I don't eat any fruits. And
mm,
it was a year in March. So I'm pretty sure I would have already, especially with the fiber issue, I'd be in a lot of trouble if you believe what people say, you can't go to the bathroom without fiber. I'd be in a lot of trouble right now after a year, wouldn't you think? And I
mm,
am thriving, thriving. So yeah,
mm.
I no, that is such a fallacy. What was the second part of that? You asked if
Just
fiber
around
was,
the nutrients, the nutrients
oh,
that
yeah,
we,
oh,
yeah.
right. Okay. Well, first off, A lot of people don't really understand this, that meat is the most nutrient dense food you can eat, and it's
Mm.
very bioavailable. Whereas in plants, they make those out to be these superfoods, but the problem is they're full of anti-nutrients, which blocks some of the absorption of those nutrients. So even on paper, if it looked like it was better, which most of vegetables are not better than meat anyway, you're only going to get a fraction of that because
Mm.
of the absorption issue, the bioavailability of it. So you are going to do so much better eating meat than eating plants or vegetables. And there are 20 plus year veterans of people who only eat meat, and they are thriving. So
Amazing.
after 20 years, if you're really having issues with nutrients, you would really notice it by 20 years, and
Yeah.
these people are really, really thriving. And most of these long-term carnivores don't even eat liver. So it's not even like an organ thing where you have to eat that in order to get all your nutrients. They are doing absolutely great without any vegetables or fruits. So the whole nutrient missing thing is just not even in the equation. And now
Mm.
if you're eating dried meats and, poor quality kind of thing, and you're eating carbs along with that, that's when you risk having scurvy and weird things like that. But if you're eating
Mm.
fresh meat and you're eating enough of it, there's not a problem. I mean,
Mm.
it would be I know of no one who has had a problem. And I talk to a lot of people, and I know a lot of people in the community, and I have yet to hear any negative story about, poor health. I'm not
Mm.
saying that there isn't an exception somewhere down the line, but I have yet to hear of it.
Mm, mm. And that's an interesting point you make about the dried meat, because drying, like beef jerky and stuff like that, that's most of the nutrients have been taken out in that process. So it is kind of a
Can.
processed food. So it is really important to stick to the fresh stuff. But the other thing I love about you, and this is what your summer presentation is going to show people, is that there is a spectrum. It's really important, and this is the whole overarching I guess message that I want people to take from this whole summit, is that there's no one size fits all approach, and you need to have the courage and the confidence to work out what works for you. And really the first step is realizing that what you're currently doing probably isn't working. And if that is the case for you, we're not saying, and you're not saying, cut out everything, start carnivore tomorrow, but just see that there are many options within the spectrum, and just play around with it, have that confidence to try different things. But as you say, also give it time. Something I see a lot too, women particularly will start, but they come as looking at it as another diet. They want to count, they want to restrict, they want to manage their portions. And that to me is a short term. That's not a lifestyle change. So that's a lot of the stuff that, you talk about that in your presentation. I think it's fantastic. I'm so glad that you're a part of it and sharing, your story. The last question I had, I think you've really answered it, is low carb spectrum sustainable? Is there anything else that you wanted to add around that?
Well, okay, I'll just briefly say that I have dealt with the issue, health issues, and struggling with my weight for well over 40 years.
Mm.
And I have never had an issue losing weight. That's not never been an issue. I never could sustain what I was doing in order to keep the weight off.
Mm.
And this is the first, first time in my life that I have happily continued eating the way I was eating. And can
Mm.
and I don't feel deprived. I am not unhappy. So it's easy to sustain it because I'm not hungry. I don't crave. I don't focus my world around food now. So,
Mm.
you have to change your relationship with food. And when you're
Mm.
constantly craving and hungry, that makes it extremely difficult to do.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna have to go with heck yeah, it's sustainable. It's the only thing that's ever worked for me, and I've done it all. I mean, I'm not even kidding you when I say I've done it all. So
Mm,
I'm speaking from experience, but you got to give it a little bit of a chance to allow it to work, so you can have that freedom to be able to break the addiction. Because I'm sorry, most of us are addicted to food. You
mm,
ask somebody, oh, don't have that ice cream. And they're going to go, I'm not going to give up my ice cream. Guess what? Addiction. And people don't really get that. But when they
mm,
fight so hard not to have a certain food, they're addicted. I
mm,
mean, you
mm,
call it what you want, but
mm.
look up the definition of addiction, you know.
Exactly. All right. Well, so great to talk to you. Thank you for taking the time to chat. I can't believe you're over in Texas and I'm here in Melbourne. The beauty of the internet,
Ah,
it's just amazing. And
great. Love it.
I, I'm sure so many people are going to be really looking forward to watching your summit presentation. So thanks for being involved, Amber. It's such a pleasure.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a lot of fun, and I hope y'all watch all the summit and all the different presentations, because they're going to be very amazing. And thank you for watching.
Awesome. Thanks, Amber.
Thank you, Tracy.